Hey everybody, Boone White with the 323 Concept Furniture Restoration here. You are watching the 323 vlog. Today we are refinishing an antique dining table. Just a small round table with 4 leaves. As you see, it's got a little bit of frame damage. Got these awesome spiral legs, but unfortunately they're really loose as well, so we'll have to address that issue. Not going to be super difficult. So as I always like to start, I like to do a full disassembly. As you see, these got 4 nails holding the legs in, and then obviously the dowel that runs all the way through. So, like I said, I always like to start with a full disassembly. You may be different, you may like to leave all this together, but that's just me. So I do a full disassembly, get everything taken apart. It just sort of helps me to, one, it helps me to sand it and strip it better and do it a little more efficiently. So anyways, we're going to start by taking these legs out. As you see, I'll slow it down, but I use a rubber mallet, sort of pop down on that board, and that sort of helps loosen up those nails and give me a little bit of room to pry it loose. But I'm just using a combination of my pry bar and this nice pair of pliers to get those nails out. Nothing super difficult here, just get these disassembled and then on to the next step. We're going to take these support blocks off, and these are just there to help support. They actually are there for the legs to attach to at the end, which you'll see. So as you see, the top was, I also wanted to disassemble it to address these issues on the top. A lot of the joinery was coming loose. So I just very carefully and lightly tapped that loose. It was pretty much all the way done. If it needs a little persuasion, you can use a heat gun to loosen up the glue joint. But I go through with my nifty little carbide scraper and clean up the edges and the joints. That helps get all the dirt and grime and any old residue off of there before I get ready to glue it. After I get those cleaned up, this had some of those metal joinery fasteners that you see on furniture sometimes. I needed to get those out of the way. I think those were added along the way at some point because they're not an older product. But once we get all that done, I'm ready to get into the sanding phase of the project. I start off with usually 100 grit. This is a solid wood table, so I don't really have to be super careful of going through veneer, obviously. So I clean up all my edges. You sort of saw my sander at an angle. I wasn't rounding off the edges. That was an actual angle on the joinery. So but anyways, we start with 100 grit, get all of the original finish off. This finish wasn't too stubborn, so that was really nice. Once I get the main part of the finish off, I will address any small detailed areas like you see here with my soda blaster. Always test in an inconspicuous area, make sure you're not going to damage your finish. And this works really good at detailed areas. So I just needed it just a little bit for the tabletop edges, and after I finish that, I go into the legs. Now this is where it really came in handy. If you can imagine, this would take forever to hand sand all of that finish off without losing detail on the legs. So this soda blaster, I'll put a link in the description where you can find that, but came in super handy for this project. So once I finish that, I get into my fine grit, usually do 120 and then 150 grit to get it where I want it to be. I'm going to start reassembly here, and I want to point out I'm using this nifty screwdriver I found. I remember having one, my dad having one as I was growing up, and I bought it recently, and it really came in handy. It's this tool right here. I'll put a link where you can find it as well, but it's called a Yankee screwdriver, that one there, and you basically just push down and it spirals to turn your screw. So it's really cool. I'll do a further demonstration on that in the future, but just wanted to share that with y'all. Pretty cool tool. But we're just going to work on reassembly of the table. A little frame piece needed glued back on. So here I'm reassembling the legs. Obviously, I'm a huge proponent of always using screws and glue when reattaching, and that'll get the job done. So that's what we're doing here. Just putting some glue on the top side of that leg and making sure we get some screws to pull it tight, and that'll glue up nice. I did forget to record the staining portion of the tabletop, but I did catch myself as I was getting through the legs, and I wanted to use a brush as I'm staining these legs. I just thought it was a lot easier to get into all the grooves, and for legs like this, I recommend something that dries a little slower, maybe an oil-based stain. That way you have plenty of time to get your stain on there, and then you wipe it down with a cloth and you should be good to go. But highly recommend a slower drying stain if you've got something super detailed like this that requires a little bit of time to get the stain on there before you can dry it. So um, on this one, I'm using Old Masters stain. I don't use that one super frequently, but it worked out good for this project. Um, and then as far as my brush, not using anything fancy there. And my rags, I get my rags in a 25-pound box from Timberlane Solutions. They're really good. They're all really good sizes. If you've ever bought rags from Home Depot, you know the frustration. They're, scraps for the most part, and a lot of times they don't work out very well. But these blue rags from Timberlane Finish Solutions work really well. And they last forever if you get that 25-pound box, and I think it's less than $75 shipped, somewhere in there. All right, so we are into the finishing phase. As you see here, I'm applying my finish. I think for this one, I decided to go with Helmsman spar urethane. It was a interior-exterior stain. It's going to be good for moisture resistance. I don't think I've ever used this one. I spray a lot of Renner finishes, but just wanted to try it out for this project. It's a matte finish. And anyways, getting the tabletop done here, I will apply 2 coats of my finish on a project, and then from there I go into using a 400 grit sandpaper to just lightly sand down the top. Be very careful, especially around edges, but feel with your hand. Your hand is going to tell you a lot more than your eyes will, so feel around with your hand. If you feel any dust nibs, use that 400 grit paper all over, and just be very careful, like I said, not to take the finish off, or the stain rather. And then from here, if you see that little blue rag, that's a cheesecloth, and it's a little tacky. I love using these. They get all the dust off, and then after I get all the dust off, we move into our last finish coat. I usually do 3 to 4 finish coats and let it cure for a few days, but I will also put a link in the description where you can find the sprayer that we use. I've been using the Apollo 7700 gun with the Precision 5 Pro turbine the last few years, and really love it. It puts out a great finish, atomizes really well, and has held up pretty good. So a couple hiccups, but I think they're working through those. As you see here, we got it all reassembled, and this is the final product. It's got a beautiful quarter sawn oak tabletop. The leaves, however, are flat sawn, so they look a little different, but that's okay. And then the legs were a little bit of a different grain, so that's why they turned out just a hair darker, which is fine. But overall, I was really happy with the end result. Just want to say thank you all so much for tuning in and watching the video today. If you've got any questions at all, please comment below. We'd be happy to chat with you. If you have any interest in any of the tools or supplies we used, I'll definitely put a link in the video description. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for future video updates. Hope to see y'all in the future.